what CRO basically involves is that as somebody in marketing, like a digital marketer or as a growth hacker, you should be able to access the website in a way that you can change it without having to rely on IT. So what that basically means then is you as a marketer can come up with scenarios and things which are quicker to just like to test out and see whether that impacts any kind of growth. And there will be a few metrics which I'll explain. Um, but the overall understanding should be CRO is directly proportional to speed. So if it's not fast enough, then you're not doing it right in a way. If you are like, let's say, coming up with changes which are quite static. So for example, you come up with some things and you go through the entire cycle and then you're not able to do that or repeat that again. That's not really CRO. CRO means continuous change. So you should strive to improve the website very frequently without worrying too much about IT. So just to give you some examples, these are case studies which we worked on within our own agency. So for example, for VizCore, we started with a conversion rate of 2%. Conversion rate in this context meant people filling out the form. And by iteratively implementing changes and implementing things which improve the overall user experience, we managed to increase the conversion rate by 7.56%. So which involves basically out of 100 visitors, there will be around 7 to 8 people who will fill out the form. And I will explain exactly why that number is important, but to just understand that in this context, we were increasing form signups. But in some cases, let's suppose there's a page which links to another page, and in that context, the conversion could be just a click through. So from one page to another page. In the second instance, in which we had the Amati page, we managed to change or improve the conversion rate from 3% to 8%. And there were quite a few psychological things which we implemented, and there are quite a lot of known psychological triggers which we can always think of when we create landing pages or web pages. So if you see on the left side VizCore, the first thing which you will notice is we had the Trust Pilot stars on the second one, which was the winner one, and that straight away increased conversion rates by 2%. On the right side, for example, for Amati, we changed the picture of James looking at a violin versus Charlotte looking at the form, because the way Charlotte is looking at the form makes the visitor look at the form, because the person is not looking at, let's say, directly at the screen or directly at the page, but they're looking at somewhere, and it gives you like a directional cue where you should be, what you should be doing. So, for example, in this case, people would directly look at the form rather than looking at Charlotte. So there's quite a lot of hidden tactics which we can implement. There's no fixed rule on what you shouldn't test, but I think if you look at our own website, apextra.com, for every landing page which we did, we came up with a list of things which we can test. But that was a very minimal subset of things which we put together. There's literally no limit. You can come up with scenarios of different things. And for example, going back to the VizCore example, you can also notice that we had a different heading where in the first instance we had have a successful SAP career with guaranteed placement versus the only way to have a successful SAP career. So that shows authority, and that also shows that to the visitor that these are the guys who know their stuff in a way. So there's a copywriting element, there's a design element, and there's overall a marketing element which goes into conversion rate optimization. And I think this is very important. This will give you context on why it's so critical. So let's suppose like in VizCore's context, they were, let's say, spending £1,000, and out of those £1,000, they would get 555 visitors. And if the landing page had a conversion rate of 5%, they would get 27 leads. So these leads are, let's say, just leads. They're not customers. And let's suppose their closing rate of from leads to customers was about 10%. And if the ticket product or the product they're trying to sell was worth £200, the number of sales they would get out of spending £1,000 was 400. So meaning the cost per lead was £37, and the cost per acquisition, which is basically the amount they have to spend to get one customer, is £500. Although these numbers, they don't make sense, but it's a good way to figure out if you change one metric here, so many things have a ripple effect. So for example, the conversion rate, which is basically visitors to leads, and that's where we come in. We build landing pages where we improve conversion rates. So now imagine if we came up with a new version which improved conversion rates by 10%. So that would change the game altogether. So here, now with 10% conversion rate, we have 55 leads instead of 27, which means if with the same closing rate of 10%, we have now 5 customers who will pay us £200, which is in total £1,000, which will cover the ad spend. But the point is, you effectively double your sales just by increasing your conversion rate. And that's a huge improvement. And this number will increase. So the more you spend now, the more sales you will get. And also because your cost per lead has been decreased, you can effectively also reduce your ad spend. But anyways, that's for the business to decide whether they want to invest now more money or less money. But the fact that we reduced the cost per lead from £37 to £18 is a huge, huge business win. And I think that's the kind of thing which we want to bring onto the table, where businesses, that when they come to us, they have a problem that their websites are not converting enough, or let's say they are converting, but they're not converting at a point where they would get more leads or sales out of it. And that's where we come in. If we can increase this to a number which makes them more money, they would obviously invest more, not just like their own money with us, but they can, it opens doors for lots of other things. So because if we improve the landing page, which is like one of the pages on the website, we can use that knowledge and you can use that, let's say, tactic across other pages. And we've noticed that in one of the clients' websites which we work on, which is IEC, and we added lead gen forms across child pages, and now we generate leads. So whatever the winning formula is, there's no stopping in terms of getting more leads. So even if the conversion rate is 10%, you can still push to get it to 15 or 20. And we have had instances where the conversion rate was about 55%. So, I mean, there's no limit, really. So I think one of the basic things which I get asked is like, how do you actually come up with a test? Because there are so many things, and how would you look at to come up with something which is useful? So first of all, everybody knows Google Analytics because we use it every day and we've installed it on our clients' websites. So first of all, understanding web analytics is a critical element, like where visitors are coming from and what they're clicking, so that you understand the journey. So if, for example, there's a page journey which goes from the home page to child page to contact us page, so there's 3 pages involved, A, B, and C. If people are coming from A, but they're not going to C, that means there's something missing in the middle. And that's where you can come up with some kind of tactic to improve the page B so that it links to C. So by looking at analytics, you can find these leaks in the funnel. And the other way is to come up with an interpretation of heat maps. And this is what we've been using for quite a of our clients, especially for Amati and Viscore, where we noticed people were clicking on things which were not actually links. So that meant to us there was not enough information, where we ran like a heat map test for about, I think, 15, 20 days, where we had 1,000 clicks. And in those clicks, we noticed the blog link was not getting clicked. So we effectively removed the link from the header because there was no point using that space for the blog when people were not used or clicking it in the first instance. But we then added other things which improved the conversions. The other thing which we've used quite a lot is screen recordings. And we did this for Amati, where using Hotjar, we actually recorded user sessions of seeing what people are doing on the page, and how much time they spend, because all those metrics are very important. If they're spending less time and they're just going back or bouncing back from the landing page, that means there's not enough information. But if they're spending too much time without actually doing anything, tells us there are some call to actions missing. So we need to point them in the right direction if they spend enough time. The other thing which is quite critical is form analytics. This is not something which we use at the moment, but this is something we should be using. And maybe it's a feature which we will build in for lead gen, where we can identify what form like fields get more entries or less entries. So for example, if we have a form with 5 fields and people fill in their name, email, but they don't fill in something else, we can figure that out by using form analytics. Because we use a lot of lead gen forms at the moment where people go through stepwise filling out forms. In the future, we will be implementing form analytics within lead gen, which will allow us to see what are the steps people go to and where do they drop off. So again, so think about it as a funnel where going from A to C or D, you have these steps in the middle, and we will be able to track exactly where people are dropping off. That's amazing, because that straight away tells us if we can improve this one step in the middle, we will be able to fix this pipe in a way. So some of the tools which you should be looking at is CrazyEgg, Hotjar, and Clicktail. We use Hotjar quite a lot because it's a free tool for 1,000 visitors, and 1,000 visitors is a good number to work with. Clicktail, CrazyEgg, they're kind of similar to Hotjar, but Hotjar is one of our favorites at the moment. So how would you actually start CRO? So the first thing which you need to look at is, what does the world look like right now? So for example, if there's a page, how much does it convert? And you need to have the right setup in place. So for example, if it's a landing page in Unbounce, there is a very simple way to see how many conversions there are. But if it's a web page and there's a contact form, we need to have Google Analytics goal setup. The way it usually works is Google has a way to kind of determine how many people visited a particular page. So for example, what we do is we add a thank you page. So after filling out a form on the website, they go to a thank you page, and Google tracks how many people went onto the thank you page after filling out the form. So that will be counted as a conversion. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you can track the numbers as of that day. So whenever you start this experiment, otherwise you have no clarity on what you're comparing against. So you need a baseline. So once you have that, you would then create what is known as hypothesis for the test. And just before I explained, you can use these different tools to come up one thing which you want to test. There are two things in testing which you can think of or like read upon. One is split testing, and the other one is multivariate testing. I don't want to like discuss in too much detail about multivariate testing because it's a bit advanced. Split testing basically means you test two things, but sorry, two pages, and you test one thing at a time. So let's suppose you have two pages, but in one page you just change the color of the button from orange to yellow. But in multivariate testing, you change a lot of things, but it gets very complicated. So I wouldn't recommend doing that initially. I would focus on fixing things one at a time. So once you understand what you want to test out, you will write that out in an Excel sheet, put the date and time so that you know when you started that experiment, and then you implement those changes onto the page or the website. Once that's done, you also pick a date. So, for example, if you have a website with thousands of visitors a day, you want to restrict your, let's say, time for the test to about a week. But if you have a website with only like 100 visitors a month, so you can run that test for a month, because you need to have the statistical significance to to know whether the test actually gave you enough proof that this new variation is actually better. And I can point to you to resources which will allow you to come up with what should or how long you should run a test, because there are smarter people who put calculators in place which tell you how many days you should run an experiment. So all of that is actually taken care of by other people. So you just have to come up with a strategy. And once you implement those changes, you know your cutoff date, you record the stats as of that final date, and then you compare. So if it was a winner, you then start to implement those changes onto other things. So for example, you notice by adding Trustpilot logo, you increase conversions on a landing page. Why not now add the Trustpilot logo onto the main website, and maybe to Facebook cover photo, or to other things which are relevant wherever conversion happens. So if it's a checkout page, why not add it there? So those things which you know works, they should be now carried over to other forms. So as I mentioned, for landing pages we use Unbounce, and for normal like big blown websites, you could use a tool called Optimised. We have used a tool called Zarget in the past, but Zarget was bought over by Freshworks, which is now called Fresh Marketer. And these two tools, like Optimize and Fresh Marketer, and there's another tool actually called VWO, but it's more of a corporate or like a company-wide tool with at least like, I don't know, 2K worth of um, money you got to invest. So I would look at Optimizely, because that's what we've used in the past. And it's a really nifty tool because it allows you to change websites without having to code them. But bear in mind, as I said, sometimes what happens is the website is so bad that you can't really do any CRO. So you have to have a baseline website where you can work and improve stuff. So for example, recently we were looking at Coolmax. So unfortunately, there would be no tool which will allow us to do or increase conversions from day one. You have to at least improve it to a stage where it's in a format that you know will definitely have an impact. Once you implement those changes, yeah, you can then bring it over to Optimizely and then start to test one thing at a time. So for example, you will change the text of the button from add to cart to add to basket, or things like that. And our own tool, Lead Gen, I don't know how many of you know, but Lead Gen actually has a built-in feature where you can test forms. So in these tools like Unbounce, Optimize, Fresh Marketer, you won't be able to actually come up with a test where you can test multiple forms. So within Lead Gen, we built a mechanism which allows you to test forms with different fields. So for example, let's suppose you have a form with name, email, and phone number, and now you want to have another form with just name and email. So you want to test which of these two forms performs better. And within Lead Gen, you can actually create these two forms and test them. So that's like an amazing benefit, which we haven't really used so far in our company or in our agency. But that's something which, this is the reason why I'm having this talk to you today, so that you now can understand there are things out there. It's just now taking or using them. So that's the whole point. And I just realized Fresh Marketer has a similar logo to Lead Gen. I don't know why that happened. um, so before I show you like a quick demo of Lead Gen and some other things, I would throw out this opportunity so that you can ask me any questions, because I want to keep these sessions short so that they're more valuable in terms of knowledge. But please feel free to write in the chat window